Gygax. She is a professional human resource certified professional. She is the founder and LinkedIn top voice. She can explain to you exactly what that designation indicates. Of Spectacle Talent Partners, LLC. This is a Maryland-based company serving clients nationwide. She's going to be talking about how to master your next interview and how to turn uncomfortable interviews. And what interviews are not uncomfortable? Just, without a little Jack Daniels to prepare you. Uncomfortable interviews into confident conversations. Just to let you know how incredibly talented she is, I have to go to page 2. She is an accomplished corporate talent acquisition leader. As I said, the founder of Spectacle Talent Partners. Spectacle Talent Partners is a specialty recruitment and career solutions firm. She partners with mission-driven companies. I loved this part of it. So many companies do not have the mission as top of mind in their operations. And so these are mission-driven companies to scale their talent acquisition team, and she strategizes with corporate leaders to provide career advancement strategies. She was nominated by LinkedIn as a top voice. She shares insights and career move strategies on LinkedIn based on her 28-year career in corporate recruitment and leadership experience. Because the return to the office, RTO mandates, redistribution of the workforce and massive layoffs are contributing to today's volatile job market. Corporate clients come to Sue when they want to provide a positive and inclusive candidate experience. This is what all of you want, and she helps companies recognize that and use that information to hire and attract the top people. Individual corporate leaders also come to her when they want to make a career move with confidence and ease. So the tricks of the game is what she's going to be sharing with you, and we can't wait. So let's give a warm welcome to Sue Gygax.
Hello. Thank you so much. So I met Paul earlier. Paul, thank you for spotlighting me. He taught me what that means on Zoom. So thank you for doing that. Can you all see me okay? Is it good? All right, I'm gonna make that a little better. Maybe that's a little better. Okay. So thank you for that delightful introduction, Kathy. Appreciate that. Somebody just started. I have my window open because it is a delightful 75 degrees in Maryland. Can you hear that lawnmower? Some of you, no, it's good. Okay. It's fine for me. I didn't want it to be distracting for you all. Okay. We are going to jump into a few items this morning. I am delighted to be here and grateful for the invitation to speak with you all. I am excited to talk with you today, not just because speaking is part of what I do, and I thoroughly enjoy interacting and engaging with folks in various formats. Sometimes it's in person, sometimes it's online through a podcast, oftentimes through LinkedIn, and even video messages, those types of things. But what I'm excited about today is I've actually completely revised some of what I'm going to be talking to you about. So you guys are first hearers. So you guys are first to be able to hear some of what I'm going to share today, because I always am looking to make sure that I am speaking to you, not just from my 28 years of experience, but also from the ongoing learning engagement and things that I do to ensure that we are talking about today's strategies. So as Kathy said, we're going to be focusing in on interviews. And you all know that interviewing isn't the entirety of a recruitment process. As a matter of fact, you might be surprised to know that recruiters actually don't spend a lot of time interviewing. We block interviews on our calendars to try and cycle through those relatively quickly, because just like you, our performance indicators are how quickly and how successfully we can get somebody into a position. So interviews, while we don't spend a lot of time doing them, they are an important element of the job search process. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. I am very informal. So if you have a question, if I don't see you, I won't necessarily be able to check the chat, But if you have a question, raise your hand. I'm sure Shannon or Kathy will let me know and we can talk about something. I don't want to pass by something if there's something that you want to pause on, right? Or if I say something and you want a little more information, we could talk about that too. Okay, who's ready to jump in? Give me a high five, or get off mute, do something. All right, you guys might know that when we're on Zoom, you could just hit your space bar and hold down your space bar and you can make a comment. You don't have to go, where's my mute button, put it on, turn it off. So just hold down your space bar and we can move right along. Okay, so the interview. Somebody, Shannon, was that you who said something about French? Do you speak French?
Un peu. I lived in Montreal for 3 years, but mainly just enough to know which side of the street I needed to move my car to.
Well, okay, so you could maybe say it's better than me. Entrez-vous? The word interview actually comes from the French word entrez-vous, which means to see. Now, this suggests that this is actually a two-way conversation, right? A two-way interaction. But in reality, an interview very often feels one-sided. Mainly, you, the interviewee or the candidate, is being observed and evaluated. Can anybody resonate with that? Is it just give me a hand wave or something, right? Does that sound like, yeah. So many times they can feel uncomfortable because there feels as though there's an inherent imbalance of power, right? So we're just laying some foundational things here. So if you ever get nervous, if you're like, gosh, I was nervous in that interview, I didn't expect to be nervous. I know my stuff. I knew what I wanted to talk about. There is a reality here that we need to understand and simply acknowledge. We're just observing it. We're just observing what that reality is. All right, I've got a few more foundational things to talk about. Another area, so this helps us understand why they are so uncomfortable, right? It can feel as though you're being judged or maybe even scrutinized. And while a good interviewer will do everything in their power to make people feel comfortable in the recruitment, in the interview process, sometimes it's only internally we're hearing these stories and it feels uncomfortable and can lead to anxiety. Does anybody, so I know for me specifically, when I get nervous, my brain like shuts down. Does that happen to anybody else? If I feel nervous in a moment, my brain just like screeches to a halt as if there was no oil in the gears. And that can sometimes be how an interview can feel. So how are we going to overcome that? We're going to talk about that today. But first, I wanted to lay some foundational information. Oops, that is not where I wanted to go. Oh, I guess it is. Okay, so Kathy, thank you very much for that lovely hello, this is me, this is who I am. 28 years, you've heard that in talent acquisition. My last 11 years in corporate talent acquisition, I was leading high growth teams at multi-million and multi-billion dollar companies. We literally hired thousands of people a year. That was our mandate, to hire thousands of people a year. And when you're in those environments, when you're in high growth environments, there is usually some stage of the process where the capabilities of the talent acquisition team is outpaced by the growth. And that's where I came in. We would come in and we would develop the teams and help them become trusted advisors, implement technology, implement processes that I created were implemented multinationally. Policies, same type of thing. So when I speak with folks, whether it be in sessions like this, which I love to do, or in my private co-working sessions, or when I'm working with my corporate clients, what I lean on is all of those experiences when we were successful hiring those people. You might think Spectacle Talent Partners is a funny name, and it is. So I agree with you. I love it because a spectacle is something that is intentionally created. And that's what we try and do, whether it be with my corporate clients or individual clients. Specifically relative to you folks, developing my private co-working sessions helps you shorten your learning curve, so you don't feel like you're starting from scratch or wasting your time with generic advice. If you have ever been online and you're an information gatherer, and all of a sudden you realize the thing that so-and-so A said actually flies in the face and conflicts with this thing that so-and-so B said, you've got too much information in your head, right? So that's not uncommon. And it's one of the things I help people avoid. Okay, so types of interviews. Let's just, again, lay the foundation, understanding the types of interviews that there are. There are 3 primary types: structured, unstructured, and combination. So vast majority of interviews are combination. So a structured interview is where every candidate gets asked the same question. You may not know that the recruiter is going through the same exact questions, but that is what a structured interview is. The more conversational style of unstructured, this is the biggest complaint I heard from hiring managers. Sue, I don't want to follow the structured interview. I'll know it when I see it. I know what my team needs. I just want to have a conversation. I'll be able to figure it out. And today, vast majority of interviews are really some combination of structured and unstructured, because there are usually some questions that everybody gets asked to be able to ascertain their level of knowledge, skills, and abilities. So is this helping just lay some essential foundations? You may already know some of these things, but I find it's important to make sure that we don't skip them so that there aren't any assumptions made on my part. Okay, continuing on the types of interviews, right? There are case interviews. Many times if you have been a consultant, there are case interviews. You have to build a business case. Technical interview, I think I heard somebody's technical. Chances are you've completed technical interviews. They're trying to evaluate your knowledge and abilities there. A panel interview. A panel interview where it's you and 3 people or 4 people, and each person is asking you a question related to the job based on their area of expertise. And oftentimes it goes down the line and they loop back to person 1, and it goes down the line and it loops back again through the allotted time that we have. A group interview is probably for professionals and mid to senior level professionals, is the least experienced one. Group interviews are usually reserved when there's a very high volume of interviewing that needs to happen. 2 primary types of interview questions. Is everybody familiar with the behavioral interview, where you answer questions? Thank you for nodding. I appreciate that. Answering questions based on your previous experience so that you prepare a specific response. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. And then a situational interview. A situational question is really just presenting you with a hypothetical situation, and you are answering that based on that hypothetical that is presented to you. All right, so now that we have a common language around what interviews are and how they are structured, how would you all like a little leverage? Who wants a little leverage? Who wants to create some leverage for their next interview? All right, so I'm going to ask whoever could come off mute, whoever's comfortable doing that. How would you define leverage?
Oh, you guys aren't shy when we're in our in-person meetings. Come on.
I know somebody's got an answer.
I don't know, maybe doing some research before you show up to the interview, so you know what the company is and what the role is.
Yep, absolutely.
It's having an advantage of some kind.
Yes, whoever that was. I can't see everybody, so thank you. Yes, leverage is a noun and a verb, right? How cool is that? Or annoying, depending on your point of view. So somebody just mentioned this. There's a mechanical advantage, right? You pull that lever, right? It means it's external force, usually giving you an advantage, less effort with equal or better results. Leverage, there's also a financial advantage when we talk about leverage. But I'm talking about leverage as a verb. So we're talking about the insights I'm going to share with you next is giving you leverage so that you can use them to its maximum advantage. Does that sound good? I'm good. All right. So insight number one, we're digging right in. I'm not holding back. Insight number one. Did you know that every job maps to one of 5 problems?
I do not know that.
While they may map to more than one problem overall, the reason a company posts a job is there was one primary problem they are trying to solve. So think about this. In today's job market, there are more reasons for companies to not open a position than to open one. So they have to have a serious problem in order for them to want to dedicate the time, the internal resources, the money it's going to take to hire somebody plus their total benefits package, so the total compensation package, and the resolve to actually decide on who it is that they're going to hire. Right? The last thing they want to do is be the next senior leader or CEO or company who's headlining the next article about layoffs, right? So there's some interesting things happening in the market. When I was at a multi-billion-dollar company and I was heading up the talent acquisition team, we were in very high growth mode. There was a sense of optimism in the company. We were hitting our targets and exceeding our targets. Everybody was getting over 100% bonuses. The company was doing well and exceeding its financial targets. So there was an optimism that prevailed, not just within the company in meetings and boardroom meetings and town halls, but it prevailed within the hiring models as well. So when in that type of environment, when the COO and I would be in a discussion, he'd go, Sue, we need somebody to solve this problem over here. We're not entirely sure what we're going to need them to do. But, something like he literally would stand in his office and give me somehow by making a circle, made his vague explanation more understandable. So, something we think there's a problem. Go see what you can find. Go see. And because he was the COO, and because even though I asked him several questions to try and elicit a little more clarity, and I got a little oftentimes, he by no means was being malicious. They just didn't know. And so by doing that, he was this vague explanation. I was responsible to try and go out and extract information from candidates and bring them forward and complete what were probably considered generalized searches. And sometimes those materialized more and sometimes they didn't. But if I knew more about what I'm going to share with you then, if I would have framed my questions differently. And so because I know this now, I wanted to share it with you because it is really not about trying to solve the problem, but it's understanding which problem they're trying to solve. So who's ready? You guys ready? Here we go. The 5 problems. So I want you to put aside job titles, right? So job titles are made up. They're made up, right? There's lots of great work. My compensation and benefits friends, they do lots of great work around creating a comp philosophy, around making sure that we have hierarchy and that people's job titles, and there's career laddering and there's ways in which people can get promoted within the organization. But that's not what this is about. This is really about the tasks you undertake and the value that you add, rather than the label that's attached to your position. So I'm going to ask you guys to help me out here. So if you think the first problem, make us more money, one of the first things you might think about is a business development person, right? Seems kind of obvious, right? But it could also be a product development person, innovating a new product, right? Save us time. Save us time. That could be a project manager. right? Or a developer creating automation tools. An agile project manager, so taking us from a waterfall system into an agile system, implementing those methodologies. It could be an executive assistant who keeps everybody well organized, lowering our risk. This could be data analysts, right? We don't want to go in and make big financial decisions without a good amount of data. They can identify market trends. They could also be the legal advisors, keeping the companies within regulatory framework. Anybody want to share when they think for assisting in our need for change? There are people whose jobs it is change managers within HR, right? Change management professionals, it's a whole profession. But there are others whose primary responsibility, the primary problem they're trying to solve is assisting in our need for change, bringing up new ideas, helping make sure that we are adapting to the current markets, whatever is happening in the current market.
I personally believe project managers can be in almost every aspect of these five.
Yeah. And a lot of jobs can have some degree in which they touch one of these five problems. But the primary problem, that's what you're looking for. And that's where when you look at the position description, it's also one of the reasons why networking and talking with people at the organization can be so beneficial. Once you understand, you're listening for which problem are they telling me they're trying to solve with the position description, with any conversations that you have informally, and then of course during the interview process. So the clues are in the position description and they are in the conversations that you can have. Again, the primary problem, Shannon's right. There's probably, you could map something to each of these, but you're trying to understand the primary problem, because that makes it easier for you to do what we're going to talk about next. So who's ready for insight number 2? All right, insight number 2. Star stories are obsolete. Ooh. Who knows what a star story is? Somebody come off mute. I'm sure you have heard them, talked about them.
Star stories?
Yes.
Or what do they mean?
What is stars? Mhm.
The STAR is an acronym for situation, task, action, result.
Yes, exactly. People teach the star story all the time, and there is some merit to a star story. A star story was actually the whole format was developed in the 1970s by DDI. It's a leadership organization that's alive and well today. And they did a great job devising a framework for people to try and explain why they are well qualified for a particular role. However, it was developed in the 1970s. Does today's job market look like the 1970s job market? Right? Is there anything about the 1970s job market that looks similar to today? So while it can, no, because we had the rise of remote work, right? So the reshuffling of the workforce, the rise of remote work, hybrid work, on-site work, all of those things, right? We have layoffs from organizations that we probably never would have anticipated having gone through layoffs. We also have the headwinds of socio and economic challenges that are facing organizations today. So the star stories are obsolete because they don't do enough. They don't do enough to position you to bust out of the candidate pack. So are you wondering what a good alternative is? Is anybody curious? Okay. So I said I'll talk a little bit more about star stories. You all know this, so thank you to whoever shared with us what it is: situation, task, action, result. It's a very rigid structure, right? To some extent, a structure is good, but being too rigid means you're not always able to go with the flow or answer some of those questions, right? Alongside that, we have lacking flexibility. There's a very specific focus on past experiences with very room for shifting that. Limited contextual information. If you walk away from anything around this explanation with star stories being obsolete, is the value and importance in every stage of your job search to give people context. Because my role as an executive recruiter, as a corporate leader, is not just, can you do this job, whatever this job is. My role is to help decide if you can do this job at my company. And that makes all the difference. Because I'm not just looking at your knowledge, your skills, and abilities. I'm also thinking about my culture, the team dynamics, and how we work. Right? Lack of reflection, I kind of just mentioned something about that. And sometimes it can feel formulaic. One of my private clients paid somebody a lot of money to come up with more than 50 star stories. More than 50. How in an interview, when interviews, by the way, are getting shorter and longer at the same time. So there's the rise of the 30-minute interview, if anybody's ever experienced 30-minute interviews. But longer because more people are involved. So we have this interesting dynamic. He was struggling to try and recall any one of these 50 star stories that this gentleman had him put together. The reality is, you're not going to. Which is why he wasn't getting any traction on his job search until he and I worked together. Any thoughts or questions here?
So if not the star story, you're going to tell us what?
That's right. So what's happening with the star story is basically you're making the person you're talking to a third-party observer. Your focus is on explaining and telling rather than sharing and involving. All right, so here we go. Do you love a great story? Do you love really, do you love a great story? I love a great story. We were at dinner the other night. My daughter was home with a couple of her girlfriends, one of her roommates from college, and we were talking about our favorite movies, right? Our favorite movies are because they tell us a story. They tell us a story. So come off mute if you would, and tell me what a great story has in common, what all great stories have in common. One thing that you think all great stories have in common.
It has a hook, something that intrigues you enough to encourage you to continue listening.
Yes, great hook.
And there's usually an obstacle to overcome.
Yes, a worthy conflict. What else?
The challenge, action, and what I do and what is the result.
Action. What actions? Yep.
Usually some sort of lesson at the end, either hopefully a happy ending, but if not a happy ending, then one that is educational.
Yes, happy and or educational.
And just
Some type of
arc to the story. Sorry.
The story arc. Yes. Yes. Come on, Pixel. We learned from Pixel, right? The Pixel model of storytelling. Come on. Yeah, there's a resolution.
Surprising ending.
A surprising ending sometimes. Absolutely. Absolutely. The twists and turns. So there's interesting characters. There's a worthy conflict. There's some type of challenge that people have to overcome. And then there's a resolution. Those are every great story has those elements in common. They bring the listener into the story, right? They bring the listener in so that they can engage, and understand. A great story stands out because it connects with the listener. So let's dig into this idea a little bit more. So we tell stories through movies and books and conversations with friends, right? We use them. So you guys touched on this as you were telling me about your great stories. We share knowledge. We want to be entertained. We tell the story to be better understood. We tell the story to be helpful, to be funny, or maybe even to be liked. Stories play a significant part in our world for centuries. In every single culture, there has been a method of storytelling. And even in our fast-paced digital world, stories have not changed all that much. We've seen them come to life in very unprecedented ways through social media, through AI, and the technical wizardry of a great Avengers movie. But the reason we tell stories has not changed because a great story is still one of the most effective ways to connect. We're hardwired. We're social creatures. We are created to be social. A great story has a clear structure and a purpose. You don't know where as the listener, you don't know where the story is going, but the author does. The author knows exactly where they're taking you. Now, the most powerful stories are not just facts, they are human stories. Showcasing, in the case of an interview, if we just brought this idea forward to the interview process, showcasing your emotional intelligence, your ability to understand, interpret, and respond to the emotions of others. As a matter of fact, it's vital in virtually every job that's available today. Are there any jobs that you can think of that don't require you to have emotional intelligence, the leadership skills as well as the interpersonal skills, your technical chops, as well as your interpersonal capabilities? As a matter of fact, a study done by the Leadership IQ company in 2020, they found in their study that attitudes attributed to 89% of the hiring failures. 89. And that the technical component was only 11% of the hiring failures. Let that sink in for a minute. 89% of the hiring failures were due to attitudes, this interpersonal skill not being sussed out through the interview process. This is why the ability to tell the great story is so impactful today. So in the course of an interview, these are other reasons why telling a story is special. The percentage of verbal and nonverbal that people take in when we're telling a story, I've seen plenty of studies, you probably have too, and the ranges are all over the place. The most important thing to remember and what helps make a story special is that there is congruence between what you say and what people see. That helps make your story memorable. It also helps make you more likable. As a matter of fact, in a Stanford University, a women's leadership lab, they said that stories are remembered up to 22 times more than just the facts. So you see why I say star stories today don't do enough. Don't do enough. They are obsolete. So in an interview, you are telling the most compelling story ever told. You're not just explaining information. You're not just talking about the task and talking about the action and giving me the result, or simply explaining to me an idea. The value of telling a story during an interview is that, yes, you want to showcase your technical chops, your capabilities and your competencies, of course. But you also want to showcase your interpersonal skills, your emotional intelligence. You want to be able to uniquely demonstrate who you are and what you do, because that's what makes you memorable. And if I could take a side side path here for just a moment. This idea carries not just in an interview, most certainly in an interview, but also with your professional brand on LinkedIn, other places that you may show up, right? The best LinkedIn brands, if you will, are ones that are not sanitized. So Kathy was kind enough to mention I was nominated by LinkedIn as a top voice, which I did not set out to achieve. I just got an email from LinkedIn like, hey, you're one of the 300 people we've decided is a LinkedIn top voice. Because what I decided to do was become intentional about creating a brand that was authentic to me. Which meant I was able to showcase not just the stuff that I know. I could talk about that all day. If anybody ever wants to talk about talent acquisition, I will nerd out on that for days. I love it. But what really made the difference is when I was willing to show up as my whole self. Because that makes you more memorable. And specifically on LinkedIn, which is different than other social platforms on this idea, is LinkedIn, it does not want you to go viral, whereas other social platforms do. I approach LinkedIn much more like a networking event than a social platform, because I'm looking to engage in conversation and then take that conversation offline. Sharing insightful, informational, informative, educational, entertaining posts in any format that you are most comfortable is the way that you can elevate your professional brand. And ways in which you're going to uncover how to always tell the most compelling story ever written, which is you. Thoughts or questions? How we tracking?
Doing great.
Doing good? Everybody
Yeah.
good?
All good.
All good. Okay. So we talked again. So just as a reminder, a great story, you want to bring people into the story with you, right? What this does is it gives you the opportunity to capture the interviewer's attention and make it more engaging. Have you ever been in an interview and you were pretty sure the person wasn't really listening? Has that ever happened? Anybody? Yeah, it's annoying, right? So one of the benefits is you're getting their attention. You're making it more engaging. It also helps reduce our own nervousness. We talked at the very beginning about the origination of the word interview, which means to see. So we're being seen, and it can feel a little uncomfortable. You're human. I get it. You don't spend your days looking to be interviewed. You'd rather not be interviewed, right? Chances are some of you haven't had to do interviews very often in your career. Even if you have been the interviewer, it's very different when the tables are turned. This nervousness can show up unexpectedly. But storytelling gives you a structure and a narrative, thus reducing your nervousness. We talked already a little bit about building rapport and the value of doing that to showcase a bit of your values, your experiences, your personality. That creates a way of making you much more authentic and memorable. And then a great story. This is one of the things that a great story does, which some of you may know already. It releases neurotransmitters like dopamine and oxytocin, which are associated with pleasure and bonding. Right, so building that rapport, if you wanted a quick way to do that, telling a great story. All right, so your spectacular story. Your spectacular story. Number one, you want to choose the right story. You want a story that is relevant to the job you're applying for and highlight your skills and experiences. Right? Of course, you want to demonstrate your ability to overcome challenges that showcases your results and your problem-solving abilities. You want to make sure that you have a great structure. Remember, we talked about the purposeful structure of a story, or Shannon mentioned the story arc. You want to set the stage, provide context, clearly define the problem, explain the actions you took, and describe the story from beginning to end, and infuse, of course, being specific and quantifiable realities, quantifiable goals, quantifiable achievements. But the biggest difference is that you are infusing your emotional intelligence into the story. You're helping the interviewer, when they're listening to you, understand. Remember when I mentioned the conversation with my COO? I infused in that what the prevailing optimism, because we were exceeding our financial goals as an organization. There was a prevailing optimism in every meeting that was an undercurrent for the type of hiring that we were going out and doing. Right? So I'm giving you some context of why some of what was happening in the organization was happening the way it was. When you can showcase your emotional intelligence, when you can showcase your ability to understand what's happening on your team, what impact was this problem having on the culture, when you can talk about the ways in which you installed and developed and cultivated, not just a particular action or result, but a resilient team, but a sustainable culture, those types of things make you much more memorable in the context of a story. So of course you want to be specific, of course you want to quantify, but you want to make sure that you are infusing those emotional and intelligence elements as well. And finally, but not the least, is practice and refine. Practice and refine. You know the difference between a pro and an amateur? An amateur practices until they get it right. A pro practices until they can't get it wrong. So by practicing and refining the story you're telling, paying attention to your tone, paying attention to body language, you refine your story so that it becomes smooth. I told the story of the growth of our organization so many times that I could do an interview while I tied my shoes. I mastered my ability to tell that story, so much so that I switched it up depending on the type of executive I was trying to recruit. So if I was recruiting a financial professional, I would focus more on the financial. If I was looking to hire a technical executive, I would focus more on the technical. I mastered the story so effectively that I could pull exactly what I needed to engage and involve this leader to hopefully then woo them into the recruitment process.
Are you willing to share your spectacular story with us, or?
I don't have one.
Right. Are you willing to share any of them as an example?
Oh goodness. Can I put a pin in that? I want to make sure that I get through the rest of our presentation.
Absolutely.
If there's time for that, we can certainly talk about that.
Of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So storytelling, at the end of the day, you want to remember that storytelling is a skill. So practice like a pro so that you can't get it wrong. And then remember when the first insight, we talked about the 5 problems, that's your story thread. Connect it back to one of those 5 problems to ensure that you're having impact. Okay. Storytelling is a skill. You've already been telling stories. You tell stories all the time. We all do, right? At dinner, at the sidelines, watching our kid play whatever sport they play, or meeting somebody for the first time, maybe in a networking, a coffee chat or something like that. We all tell stories. So understanding the most impactful stories is very useful when you want to make a memorable impact in an interview. All right, insight number 3. Who knows what the number 1 interview question is?
Tell me about yourself.
There it is. Who was that?
It's David.
Hi,
That's our
David.
videographer.
All right, David knows. Tell me about yourself. That is the number one interview question. How do you guys feel when you're answering that question? What thoughts go through your head?
The interviewer doesn't really know what to ask first. They're breaking the ice.
They're breaking the ice, okay?
What do I need to say that's going to impress this person enough that they want to continue the interview?
Yep.
They are looking for a hook to see how they can continue that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
One of our co-leaders, Charles, said that there's a pitfall with this, though, in that maybe you talk about like, oh, I'm a great equestrian, but that person fell off a horse and broke their leg when they were 5, and so they don't exactly have a great connotation with, what you just thought was a great ad.
Okay. Okay. Well, hopefully that's not the whole story of
Right.
going for a job interview is talking about a professional a hobby of some kind.
But finding a balance between how much
Finding
you
a
talk
balance.
about yourself professionally and
Mhm.
how much you talk about yourself personally as to who
Yeah.
you are.
Yeah. So what I've heard other people say is they feel like the number one interview question, tell me about yourself, is a throwaway question. It feels like the interviewer is getting ready for the interview, right? That it's the getting ready for the real question. Now, true enough, it helps set the table for the rest of the conversation, right? It can be very broad. You can talk, as Kathy said, both personally and professionally, and it helps us understand whether or not you may be a good fit for the organizational culture and the specific role. It certainly is an opportunity to highlight your skills and experiences, but one of the most important things that you want to understand is that it's a chance for you to set the tone of the interview and make a strong first impression. Because first impressions are alive and well. As a matter of fact, Psychology Today talked about the exaggerated impact of first impressions, which is related to the halo effect. So, the halo effect, you probably have heard that term. It's the phenomenon whereby the positive qualities in one of the things or parts gives rise to the perception of similar qualities. Okay, so that's a first impression. The tell me about yourself question has a lot to do with being able to set the tone. So in my own experience, when I interview folks, usually for leadership positions, I ask this question in some manner. I've already reviewed their resume. I've already reviewed their LinkedIn profile. By the way, if you are in a mid or senior level position, if you apply to a job, we're going to your LinkedIn, even after you apply, because that's where we want to look for more information. Why? Because I have a very limited amount of time and I want as much information as possible about the people that I might call so that I can maximize those blocks of time that I have to do interviews. Because the reality is recruiters are doing a whole heck of a lot of things, not just interviewing. So if you want to get to the top of a candidate's or of a recruiter's call list, understanding the value of your LinkedIn profile is something that you want to do. In my own experience, when I have asked leaders, so these are well-qualified people for the job for which I'm filling, I've asked them to express to me, answer this question, tell me about yourself, or some similar form of that question. When I do that, they become more or less qualified based on the way that they answer that question. Why? Because I'm not just listening for them to walk me through their resume because I've already read it. I'm listening for how do they answer an open-ended question? How are they able to articulate their experience in a way that demonstrates they understand this job and my company? How well do they know their own resume? I've asked people to give me information about things on their resume, and they couldn't articulate that. So there's no way that I'm presenting a candidate to a client or my employer if a person doesn't articulate effectively their background and experience well. If you answer the tell me about yourself question with a great story, with a story that resonates, with a story that pulls through that story thread from insight number 1, you can level up your experience with that interviewer. It's a little bit like your GPA. Once your GPA is up, what do?
Ask more questions.
When you're in college and you get your GPA up, you're just looking to maintain it the rest of your college experience. If your GPA drops, you got to work twice as hard to get it back up to where you wanted to maintain it. So if you answer the tell me about yourself question effectively, you are then able to maintain that level of engagement, enthusiasm, quantification of your skills, and interpersonal skills throughout the rest of the interview, as opposed to working from a deficit. So definitely not a throwaway question. Definitely not a question that you want to go in blind and just figure you'll figure it out. Definitely one that you want to prepare for as you would prepare for the rest of the interview.